One sky, two flags. In the north, the red star of revolution. In the south, the golden stripes of a fragile republic. The same rain falls on both sides, heavy, endless, washing blood from the same earth. Brothers become enemies. Villages are taught to fear their own kin. And a line of ink at the 17th parallel hardens into a border of belief. The world calls it peace, yet every drop of rain reminds the people that peace was never meant to come so easily. Welcome to Vietnam and to Season 1 of TimeGhost Cold War coverage in our series War to War, where we cover the events of the decade after World War II that brought man from the brink of destruction to the threshold of the stars. I am Sebastian Brandstetter. May 1954. Thunder echoes over the green hills of northwest Vietnam as Dien Bien Phu falls. French paratroopers, surrounded and exhausted, lower their rifles. The Viet Minh raise their red flag in victory. General Ngo Dinh Diem has done the unthinkable. His peasant army has crushed one of Europe's great military powers. Across Indochina, colonial rule teeters. In Paris, the shock is immediate. The cabinet reshuffles, and eventually, Pierre Mendes will assume power and promise to end the war within 30 days or resign. In Geneva, a conference already in progress lurches toward urgency. Diplomats from France, the United States, Britain, the Soviet Union, and China huddle in tense sessions. The Vietnamese delegation, led by the patient and stoic Pham Van Dong, holds its ground. Ho Chi Minh remains in Hanoi watching from afar. He knows that this moment, after years in the jungle, in prison and exile, may define everything. He states, "Now, in view of the new situation, we should uphold a new motto: peace, unification, independence, and democracy." The Americans stay wary. Secretary of State John Foster Dulles keeps his distance, unwilling to negotiate with communists. Washington does not want to legitimize Ho Chi Minh. The Chinese, for their part, push the Viet Minh toward compromise. Zhou Enlai counsels patience. A divided Vietnam for now will have to suffice. War with America, he warns, is not yet a price worth paying. On July 21st, 1954, the Geneva Accords are signed, the ink heavy with compromise. Vietnam will be divided, temporarily, at the 17th parallel. Ho's Democratic Republic of Vietnam will govern the north. In the south, a French-backed state of Vietnam will remain in place, its capital in Saigon, under the vague leadership of former Vietnamese Emperor Bao Dai. Elections are promised in 2 years, July 1956, to reunify the country. But no enforcement mechanism is built in. The Viet Minh agree reluctantly. The Americans and the South Vietnamese do not sign. So that's it, peace? As you all probably very well know, it is not. In Hanoi, jubilation mixes with bitterness. The Viet Minh have won a nation, but not the whole of it. Ho urges discipline. The South is ours, he tells his comrades. Just not yet. On October 9th, 1954, the last French troops exit the capital. Vietnamese banners wave over colonial buildings. The People's Army enters the city, columns in green and khaki, met with applause and tears. Independence, long dreamt of, is no longer a slogan, it is reality. In the South, however, the future remains uncertain. French influence is collapsing rapidly and leaves behind confusion. The Vietnamese National Army, the Southern Army, is fragmented, loyal not to the government but to generals and sect leaders. Bao Dai, the emperor, is detached and unpopular, ruling from abroad. Into this power vacuum steps Ngo Dinh Diem, a man out of place in modern politics, it at first seems. A devout Catholic from central Vietnam, Diem has spent years in exile. He is incorruptible, rigid, and to many unelectable. Yet in June 1954, Bao Dai appoints him Prime Minister of the South. Few take Diem seriously at first. The French generals in Saigon scoff. American advisors, cautious but intrigued, also keep their distance. The South Vietnamese army, still trained by the French, is led by none other than Diem's personal rival. Armed religious sects like the Chao Dai and the Hoa Hao control swaths of the countryside. In the capital, the Binh Xuyen, a mafia-like militia, runs the police, casinos, and brothels. Diem, seated in his modest office in Gia Long Palace, commands almost nothing. But Diem refuses to resign. He cultivates allies. In September 1954, the CIA dispatches Colonel Edward Lansdale to Saigon. A veteran of the Philippines counterinsurgency campaign, Lansdale carries a charm offensive and a belief in psychological warfare. He meets Diem, listens, and begins to act. Pamphlets and posters circulate. Loudspeakers praise Diem as a nationalist hero. Billboards echo anti-communist slogans. Diem's image, literally and figuratively, begins to spread. Then comes Eisenhower's letter. On October 23, 1954, the American president writes Diem a pledge of support. Military, financial, and moral assistance will flow directly to the southern Vietnamese government, bypassing the French. For the first time, Washington signals that it sees Diem as more than a placeholder. The US Military Assistance Advisory Group, MAAG, shifts its chain of command. Advisors in khaki shirts and dark sunglasses begin appearing at training camps, airfields, and ministries. In the same month, Operation Passage to Freedom begins as well. Backed by American logistics and Vietnamese Catholic networks, nearly 900,000 northern civilians flee to the south. Refugees stream into ports, women clutching rosaries, men hauling bags of rice, and icons of saints. Priests urge parishioners to leave the land of atheists, North Vietnam. The CIA helps design the campaign, distributing posters and producing films of communist brutality. American warships, rebranded as Angels of Mercy, ferry tens of thousands to Saigon and beyond. Diem, Catholic and nationalist, welcomes the migrants. They become a pillar of his support. Northern officers are promoted. Parishes form their own militias. Whole villages transplant onto southern soil, bringing with them stories of northern persecution, some true, others distorted to a point of propaganda. This migration remakes the demographics of South Vietnam in a matter of months, but political chaos still reigns. Diem has no army he can truly command. The Binh Xuyen still control Saigon's police force. The Chao Dai and Hoa Hao, armed and autonomous, treat Diem's government as optional. General Hin, the rival we mentioned earlier, openly mocks the prime minister in the press. By March 1955, many American officials consider cutting their losses. But then, Diem strikes. In April, after months of behind-the-scenes maneuvering, he orders loyal units of the army to move against the Binh Xuyen. Street battles erupt across Saigon, machine guns rattle from rooftops, civilians run for cover, the city burns, block by block. But Diem wins, and the gangsters flee, their gambling dens falling silent. The national police comes under central control. One by one, the other factions fall as well. In May and June, Diem's forces pressure the Chao Dai and Hoa Hao into submission. Some of their troops defect, others are disarmed. A few die as well. Diem's control extends beyond the capital for the first time, really. And his final move comes in October, when a referendum is held. Voters are asked, Bao Dai or Diem? The outcome is a foregone conclusion because the ballot boxes are pre-filled. Opposition is silenced. Official results give Diem 98.2% of the vote. So, the monarchy is abolished, the Republic of Vietnam is declared, and Diem, now as president, stands on a Saigon balcony in his formal tunic, arms raised. In Washington, the headlines are triumphant. Diem wins, blares the New York Times. Time magazine even places him on the cover. Vice President Nixon calls him the Churchill of Asia. And soon after, American money pours in, hundreds of millions of dollars in aid. Diem's government builds roads, opens schools, and issues uniforms. The American embassy beams with confidence. Vietnam, they believe, has been saved. But beneath the surface, tension coils. Diem governs with few allies. His brother Ngo and his sister-in-law Madame Ngo wield increasing influence, and political opposition is not merely discouraged, it is dangerous. The security apparatus also expands. Arrests become routine, and elections, when held, offer no surprises. The ballot boxes are stuffed preemptively, as we know. The countryside is quiet, but not peaceful. In isolated villages, former Viet Minh cadres watch. They wait. The year ends with parades in Saigon and optimism in Washington. South Vietnam is born, battered into being by a stubborn leader and an impatient superpower. But the reunification promised in Geneva, hoped for by millions, slowly fades into silence. In the north, leaders take note. They do not speak publicly, they too wait. 1956 begins with quiet defiance. In Saigon, Ngo Dinh Diem now rules the Republic of Vietnam. His uniformed guards line the boulevards, his photographs hang in offices, his decrees echo through radios. On paper, he has achieved what very few believe possible. He has dismantled the secret armies, firmly got the USA to commit, and successfully centralized the state. To his allies, he is a miracle. To his enemies, he is an authoritarian in a suit. And Geneva still casts a shadow. According to the accord signed 2 years ago, Vietnam is due to hold national elections in July the same year. The ballot is to determine reunification, north or south, communist or nationalist, Ho or Diem. But then Diem refuses. How? Well, his government announces that they, the South, never signed the Geneva Accords, and therefore they're not bound by them. He insists that the North, moreover, is not democratic and that free elections are impossible under dictatorship and that reunification can only happen through consent, not coercion. And Washington supports him. Quietly, American officials do admit what Diem does not say out loud: Ho Chi Minh would win. The North's revolutionary aura still burns bright, especially in the South's villages, where memories of the Viet Minh's anti-French campaigns remain vivid. Diem's regime, in comparison, is new, urban, Catholic, and elitist. The communists, on the other hand, are local, patient, and at least to the peasantry, familiar. In Hanoi, Diem's refusal hurts. Ho Chi Minh calls his top aides together. Le Duan, the strong-willed southerner, the loudest, most persistent voice inside the Vietnamese communist leadership, says, the South won't free itself if we just sit on the Geneva agreements. And he is not happy to be proven right. Reports from southern communists who moved north after the Geneva split tell a grim story. People are being arrested, their land taken, and are being threatened. Those who stayed in the south, hiding in forests and villages, report that Diem's troops are hunting them down one by one. Still, Ho and the North urge caution. The Democratic Republic of Vietnam, the North, proclaims its desire for peace. Radio Hanoi denounces Diem's betrayal, but beyond that, the Politburo holds back. It's too early to return to war. Instead, the North focuses on internal consolidation. Schools open in villages once shattered by war. Cooperatives form in the Red River Delta. Party cells track local sentiment and enforce discipline. And yet, a storm is still brewing. Land reform. In spring 1956, in the North reaches a fever pitch. Local officials, inspired by Maoist ideology and pressured to meet quotas, begin identifying class enemies. Villagers denounce neighbors, cadres conduct public trials, landlords, real or perceived, are stripped of property, imprisoned, sometimes executed. The campaign spirals, thousands die, rural families live in fear. By the time Ho learns the full extent, it's too late. He orders a rollback and later even issues a public apology, but the scars remain, and the glowing revolutionary North has lost some of its shimmer. Back in Saigon, the South, Diem seizes the moment. With the election deadline passed and American backing firmly secured, he begins remaking the South in his image. His brother, Dinh Nhu, forms the Can Lao Party, a secretive political network that infiltrates every level of government. Loyalty to Diem becomes the currency of survival. Universities, newspapers, trade unions, all are brought under state control. Any dissent is, of course, labeled communist. And Diem's rural strategy also centers on control. Government agents there identify former Viet Minh sympathizers. Some are rehabilitated, others jailed, some executed. Villages once autonomous now receive state-approved chiefs. Land reform remains stalled though, because large landowners, many of them allies of the regime, keep their estates. So peasants who once dreamt of redistribution are told to be patient. In the Mekong Delta, resentment grows and festers. The Americans observe all this with growing discomfort. Some US officials praise Diem publicly, but their internal memos warn of repression and political stagnation. A young and passionate senator named John F. Kennedy states, "Vietnam represents the cornerstone of the free world in Southeast Asia, the keystone in the arch, the finger in the dike, and a test of American responsibility and determination." US military assistance continues expanding, training the Army of the Republic of Vietnam, ARVN, and equipping it with modern gear. Civilian agencies fund bridges, roads, and health clinics. American advisors, often idealistic and inexperienced, file reports that no progress on paper, yet express unease in person. And soon the violence once more begins to escalate. In late 1956, assassinations of local officials, village chiefs, teachers, and police all tick upward. In remote provinces, grenades are thrown at government outposts. Leaflets appear at night denouncing Diem and the South Vietnamese government and calling for resistance. The regime officially blames bandits, but the American advisors suspect more. And, as if prompted in early 1957, the North begins re-evaluating its posture. By now, Lee Duan's position has more or less proven fact. Peaceful reunification is dead. The time for preparation, he says, is over. The Southern cadres, still operating underground, need support. The North does not yet plan a full-scale war, but small units begin supplying weapons, sending radio instructions, and identifying targets. It is subtle, quiet, and deadly. The South and Diem react promptly. He authorizes a denunciation of communists campaign. Posters with bright red ink warn of hidden traitors. Village meetings become confessionals. The security forces grow bolder, detaining thousands, where in prisons, suspected communists are tortured for names. In the highlands and deltas, the state becomes synonymous with surveillance. Loyalty is rewarded, silence is punished. But the resistance adapts. Former Viet Minh fighters rebuilt their networks in silence and secrecy. They use the shadows, temples, fishing boats, funeral processions. In some districts, they form secret courts and execute collaborators. The government's presence basically disappears after sunset. The insurgency does not yet have a name, but it is alive. In April 1957, Diem travels to the United States. His motorcade rolls down New York's Fifth Avenue beneath fluttering Vietnamese and American flags. He meets President Eisenhower, addresses Congress, and is toasted by the press as the pillar against communism. Time magazine runs another glowing profile. To the American public, he is a modest hero from the East, a man of faith, discipline, and conviction. President Eisenhower says, "You have exemplified in your part of the world patriotism of the highest order." Diem responds by attributing his success to US support. It was the courage of his people and your own faith in my country that accomplished the miracle of Vietnam. Eisenhower continues his strong public support for Diem, extolling him as the foremost advocate of our interests in the area and praising the Republic of Vietnam as an example to free nations everywhere. Here, the Cold War politics of containment and the domino theory, the idea that should Vietnam fall to communism, other countries in the region would topple as well, really comes to the fore. But behind the stage lights, some in Washington are less certain. The US Embassy in Saigon sends cautious cables. Analysts raise concerns about Diem's rigidity, his intolerance of dissent, and the alienation of his own people. The CIA warns of increasing communist activity in the countryside, but there is no alternative in sight. Diem, for all his flaws, is still seen as indispensable in Washington. By the end of 1957, Vietnam stands on a precarious edge. The North simmers in post-reform fatigue, still licking its wounds but cautiously rearming its revolution. The South marches under Diem's banners, polished, yet riddled with fear, oppression, and seething with quiet rebellion, especially in the countryside. American advisors continue their mission, building, training, planning. Some of them suspect that the ground beneath them has begun to crack, yet many remain ignorant. And in the forests of the South, in the mangrove swamps and dusty hamlets, men whisper the old slogans again: independence, liberation, resistance. They wait for orders, for weapons, for the green light from Hanoi, from the northern Vietnam. The lull is ending, the fire will return. The year 1958 opens under a haze of optimism in Saigon, but behind the government's firm speeches and American broadcasts, a quiet rhythm pulses. It is the sound of footsteps after dark, messengers between villages, coded radio transmissions, shovels scraping forest soil to bury yet another cache of rifles. The insurgency in South Vietnam is no longer a collection of scattered attacks. It is becoming an organized strike. Yet, Diem remains confident. His regime still holds the cities, the army, and the aid pipelines. State-run newspapers trumpet his accomplishments. Construction projects rise along highways, foreign dignitaries tour clinics funded by American taxpayer dollars. In meetings with US officials, Diem speaks in controlled tones about banditry in the provinces, not rebellion. He insists his strategy is working. But, as a matter of fact, the strategy is failing. The Denounce the Communist campaign peaked in brutality and then waned in effect. The prisons are full, thousands are held on suspicion alone. Torture has become more frequent than before, and fear has spread even to Diem's allies, who begin watching their words more carefully. By now, even American advisors stationed in the provinces report growing resentment among villagers, especially in areas with strong Viet Minh histories. The communists in the South begin to adopt a clearer structure. By mid-1958, provincial committees meet in secret. They build weapons, they print propaganda, and they identify targets. Their message is simple: Diem is a tyrant, and resistance is justice. The slogans echo those of the anti-French struggle. Veterans of that war, once disarmed and promised peace, now begin to return to the field, not in uniform, but in sandals and in the shadows. In Hanoi, the north, Ho Chi Minh remains cautious, but Le Duan and other leaders press harder. The reports from the south grow more urgent. The repression, they say, is becoming unbearable. Revolutionary cadres are dying with no support. The people are waiting for the north to act. The debate behind closed doors is no longer if armed resistance should resume, but how and when. In April 1958, a wave of coordinated attacks strikes several rural districts in the south. Government informants are executed. A district chief is assassinated in his home. ARVN soldiers find booby traps along jungle paths. Each attack is modest, none provoking major headlines, but to the American intelligence officers compiling monthly security reports, a line is being crossed. The violence is not the results of disorganized bandits. It is centrally coordinated, not random. Still, Diem refuses to acknowledge the scale of the threat. He reshuffles provincial leaders, issues stern proclamations, and blames the unrest on local corruption or communist remnants. He also grows increasingly insulated, relying on his brother Ngo and the Can Lao network to filter information for him. Foreign diplomats find it harder to approach. In Washington, the picture remains cloudy as well. Some officials, particularly in the CIA and the Pentagon, grow ever more uneasy. More and more reports from Saigon describe rural unrest, disillusionment with the regime, and an uptick in violence. But policymakers remain bound by the logic of containment. To abandon Diem would be to hand a strategic domino to the communists. That is unthinkable. So Eisenhower and his team stay the course. Meanwhile, the American presence only deepens. By the end of 1958, the US has poured over 700 million, that's about $8 billion in 2025 dollars, almost twice the whole GDP of Costa Rica, into South Vietnam. American advisors train ARVN officers in counterinsurgency techniques. US-funded radio stations broadcast anti-communist programs. Agricultural advisors work with farmers to raise yields. Textbooks are rewritten. Military engineers construct airstrips in remote provinces. But the insurgency adapts faster than the system can respond. In the Mekong Delta, communist units form night patrols. They ambush ARVN convoys, seize weapons, and disappear into the night. In the Central Highlands, ethnic minorities, long neglected by the state, begin providing shelter to rebels. In Quang Ngai and Long An provinces, local governments function only during the day. By night, a different flag rules the fields. At the same time, the number of attacks begins to climb. American military logs note growing incidents of armed resistance, increasingly bold in scale. Explosives are planted under bridges. State employees resign or flee. Communist propaganda leaflets, once rare, now appear weekly if not daily. Yet, no declaration of war has been made. There is no formal enemy. The enemy for now is called the Viet Cong, a nickname, a placeholder, a whisper. And still, Hanoi, Ho Chi Minh, and the North wait. Officially, the Democratic Republic of Vietnam maintains its claim to peaceful reunification, but preparations accelerate behind the scenes. Arms shipments are readied. Southern cadre lists are finalized. Communication routes through Laos and Cambodia are mapped. In quiet sessions, the Central Committee discusses a return to a protracted war. It is not announced, not yet, but the decision is basically made. Not even 2 years ago, the Vietnamese dreamt of unity. Yet, unity slips away like mist at dawn. The North declares itself the true heir of independence. The South insists it is the guardian of freedom. The United States, fearful of another red flag rising, steps in to steady the balance, driven by containment and the fear of the domino falling. But instead, they tilt it further. Propaganda replaces dialogue. Faith replaces trust. What was once a shared victory becomes a contest of visions, of ideas. The people rebuild homes on fault lines, unaware that the ground is already cracking. What is to come is not yet decided, but one thing is certain. A thunderstorm of epic proportions is brewing on the horizon. As it draws closer, the United States now stands where France did mere years ago. Can they weather the storm? Or will Vietnam also bring the new global superpower to its knees? Only time will tell. Join the mission and keep this word going, using history to better understand the world we find ourselves in today. Head over to TimeGhost.tv or Patreon.com and join the TimeGhost army. Thank you for watching, and Excelsior!